The audience of The View was buzzing with energy as Matthew McConaughey walked onto the stage, all Southern charm and easy confidence. The crowd roared with applause as he gave that familiar smile, waving in that slow, effortless way that made him seem both humble and in control of the room. The theme music faded, and Joy Behar leaned forward in her chair, already grinning as if she had a plan. Whoopi Goldberg gave her usual warm welcome, gesturing for Matthew to take his seat at the center of the panel. He sat down, crossing his legs casually, his eyes glinting with good humor. He had been there to promote his latest project, a mix of film and philanthropy, something that tied his Hollywood clout to real-world causes. The conversation started smoothly. Matthew talked about his foundation in Texas, his love for storytelling, and his belief that people needed to come together more often rather than argue about everything. The audience nodded along, clearly enamored. Every time he spoke, he drew people in with that honeyed voice and his trademark all right, cadence. Even Joy seemed impressed at first, listening with a faint smile as he spoke about gratitude and perspective. But Joy Behar wasn't one to let things stay soft for long. She had built her career on sharp questions, the kind that cut beneath the pleasantries. When the conversation drifted to politics and culture, her eyes brightened. She leaned forward, one hand on the table, her tone turning from curious to probing. "Matthew," she said, "you've been talking a lot about unity lately, about meeting in the middle, about both sides coming together. But don't you think there are some issues where there isn't a middle ground, where one side is just plain wrong?" The air tightened. The audience's reaction was a mix of murmurs and shifting in seats. McConaughey tilted his head, his expression calm but thoughtful. "Well," he said slowly, "I think when we stop listening to the other side altogether, we start losing the chance to make any progress at all. I'm not saying we agree on everything, but if we stop talking, we stop learning." Joy gave a small laugh, the kind she used when she thought someone was dodging a point. "But come on, Matthew," she said, her tone quick and sharp. "There's listening, and then there's giving a platform to people who are just plain wrong. Don't you think that kind of thinking can be dangerous? You can't just all right, your way through moral issues." The audience gave a mix of laughter and gasps. Matthew smiled politely, but the spark in his eyes said he wasn't amused. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his voice dropping lower, steadier. "Joy," he said, "you're good at what you do. You ask tough questions. But there's a difference between disagreeing with someone and dismissing them. If we start calling everyone who sees things differently dangerous, then we're just building more fences instead of bridges." The crowd applauded softly. Joy crossed her arms, unfazed. "I'm not talking about disagreement, I'm talking about facts. You can't meet in the middle with people who deny reality." McConaughey nodded slowly, his smile fading into something more serious. "Reality doesn't belong to one side, ma'am. It belongs to whoever's willing to face it. That's all I'm saying." That line hit differently. The audience clapped louder this time, a few cheers breaking through. Joy blinked, surprised by the reaction, but she pressed on, refusing to yield. "So you're saying everyone's right in their own way? That's convenient, isn't it?" He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "No, ma'am, I'm saying nobody learns anything if we all talk like we already know it all." The energy shifted again. Even Whoopi, who had been watching quietly, gave a small nod of approval. Joy laughed, but the edge in her voice was unmistakable. "That sounds nice, Matthew, but it's not that simple. Some people need to be called out. You can't just smooth talk your way around every problem." He looked right at her then, no trace of that movie star grin left. "Joy," he said evenly, "I don't smooth talk my way around problems. I live through them. I've seen what happens when people stop talking. Families fall apart, communities split. You can't fix what's broken by yelling louder. Sometimes you've got to shut up and listen before you swing." That last line landed like a thunderclap. The audience burst into applause. Whoopi covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. Sarah Haynes looked between them with wide eyes, half shocked, half amused. Joy raised her eyebrows, sitting back in her chair. "Well," she said, trying to recover, "you've got quite the way with words, don't you?" Matthew leaned back, smiling now, the tension in his shoulders easing. "Words are one thing," he said. "Listening's another. I'm just saying, Maybe we could use a little more of the second one these days." The audience erupted again, clapping and cheering louder this time. Even some of the crew backstage couldn't hide their grins. Joy tried to laugh it off, glancing toward Whoopi for help. Whoopi, still chuckling, finally chimed in. Okay, Joy, you might want to tread lightly. He's smoother than butter, but he'll call you out faster than a Texas storm." Joy waved her hand dismissively. "Oh please, I can handle a Texas storm." Matthew smiled, looking straight into the camera. "I believe that," he said with a grin, "but sometimes the storm needs to know when to pass." The audience went wild. The mix of laughter and cheers filled the studio, and even Joy cracked a smile, shaking her head. "You got me there," she admitted, half under her breath. The segment wrapped up a few moments later, the applause still echoing. As the camera cut to commercial, Joy leaned over the table and said something to Matthew that the microphones didn't quite catch. Whatever it was, he just laughed and gave her a friendly pat on the shoulder before standing up to greet the audience once more. But the moment didn't end there. Backstage, as producers gathered around reviewing playback footage, they knew what they had. The exchange was raw, unscripted, and powerful. Within hours of airing, the clip would make its way online, edited and shared with captions like "Matthew McConaughey shuts down Joy Behar with class and McConaughey schools the view on respect." For now, though, the tension in the studio had turned into a strange mix of admiration and disbelief. Joy sipped her coffee, pretending to brush it off, but the faint smile on her face gave her away. McConaughey, ever composed, waved to the crew as he left the stage, that easy southern charm returning. "Nice sparring with you," he called over his shoulder. Joy smirked. "You too, cowboy." He gave that trademark grin, tipping an imaginary hat before heading out the side door toward the waiting crowd outside the studio. The cheers rose up as he stepped into the light, and somewhere behind him, Joy Behar couldn't help but laugh, partly in frustration, partly in admiration, because no matter how sharp her questions had been, he'd handled them like a pro. Calm, grounded, unshaken. And by the time the clip hit millions of views, the internet had already decided who won that round.